The fire crackled softly in the hearth of the Marley Inn's common room, its warm glow casting dancing shadows upon the worn wooden floorboards and faded wallpaper. Jack Marley sat across from Mabel, the inn's most enthusiastic guest, who was nestled comfortably in a high-backed armchair, her bright scarves wrapped tightly around her neck as if to hold close the warmth, not just of the fire, but of the moment itself. Mabel's eyes sparkled with a light that seemed to defy her years. Her voice, soft yet unwavering, began to weave a tapestry of memories and revelations that surprised Jack more than he expected. "You know, Jack," she said, her gaze flickering toward the flickering flames, "I came here looking for a bit of excitement. A little thrill to shake up the routine of my golden years. But what I found, well, it's been so much more than that." Jack leaned in, his usual witty banter replaced by a rare stillness. He watched as Elena, the inn's mischievous poltergeist, drifted silently just beyond the armchair, her translucent form shimmering faintly. She was rearranging the antique teacups on a side table, a playful habit she indulged in when she sensed a moment of importance. But tonight, even Eleanor's mischief was hushed, as though sensing the gravity of Mabel's words. Mabel continued, her voice tinged with a mixture of nostalgia and newfound hope. "After my husband passed, I felt like my world had shrunk. The days bled into one another, and the silence in my house was deafening. I traveled here on a whim, seeking ghosts to chase away my loneliness. Instead, I found connection, life in all its strange and wonderful forms. This place, with its quirks and spirits, reminded me that even in the quietest moments, there's laughter to be found." Jack felt a lump in his throat. It was rare anyone could break through his stubborn optimism with such sincerity. "I never thought of it like that," he admitted, running a hand through his tousled hair. "I've been so focused on keeping the inn open, on making it work as a business, that I forgot what it could mean to people." Eleanor floated closer, her gaze softening as she listened. The playful spark in her eyes dimmed into something gentler. She reached out, her translucent fingers barely brushing a teacup before it settled quietly into place. It was a small gesture, but to Jack it felt like an unspoken promise, a reminder that the ghosts, too, were part of this newfound family. Mabel smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's not just about scares or stories, Jack. It's about the laughter we share when the lights flicker, the comfort we find in a strange hand reached out across the veil. This inn has given me a second chance at joy, and I think it's giving you one, too." The room seemed to breathe with the weight of her words. Outside, a soft breeze stirred the curtains, carrying with it faint echoes of ghostly laughter, a chorus of spectral voices that had become the inn's heartbeat. Jack looked around at the worn walls, the creaking floorboards, the gentle chaos of life and afterlife intertwined. In that moment, he understood that he wasn't just fighting to save a building. He was nurturing a sanctuary where hope, friendship, and laughter thrived amidst the haunting. "Maybe it's time I stopped worrying about the numbers and started paying attention to the stories," Jack mused aloud, a genuine smile breaking through his usual dry humor. "After all, isn't that what this place has always been about?" Mabel chuckled softly, her eyes twinkling. "Exactly. And I'll be here to tell everyone just how magical it is." As the night deepened, the bond between the living and the spectral strengthened in the Marley Inn's cozy heart. The laughter, once faint and scattered, now echoed with purpose, a joyful resilience that no amount of financial strain or ghostly pranks could extinguish. And somewhere in the shadows, Eleanor's laughter joined in, light and mischievous, sealing the promise of many more adventures to come. Jack's thoughts raced with possibilities. If this was the true magic of the inn, then perhaps the future held more than just survival. Perhaps it held redemption, community, and above all, laughter that could bridge even the veil between life and death. The fire flickered again, shadows dancing like old friends on the walls, and Jack knew that whatever came next, he would face it with a heart lighter than it had been in years. The haunted Marley Inn was no longer just a crumbling building to be saved. It was a home reborn through the laughter and stories of those who dared to believe. And that, he decided with a grin, was worth every spectral prank and sleepless night yet to come. The door creaked open, a gust of chilly air slipping in, carrying with it the faintest whisper of a new visitor's footsteps. Jack rose, ready to greet whatever or whoever was about to step into the warm, chaotic embrace of the Marley Inn. The adventure was far from over. "Welcome," he said softly to the shadows, "to the best haunted inn you will ever stay in." And with that, the next chapter of laughter, chaos, and ghostly mischief began anew. Jack Marley stood in the dim light of the Marley Inn's main parlor, the air thick with a curious mixture of dust, old wood, and something faintly reminiscent of lavender and mischief, a scent that had come to signify Eleanor's presence more than anything else in this crumbling sanctuary. He rubbed his temples, scanning the room filled with the oddest coalition he'd ever gathered, a band of spirited specters. His loyal best friend Tommy holding a toolbox with a dubious expression, and Sally, the skeptical local historian who looked as though she'd just reluctantly agreed to a seance. Eleanor the poltergeist hovered nearby, translucent and shimmering, her vintage dress fluttering, as if caught in a breeze no one else could feel. She flashed a grin that was equal parts gleeful and conspiratorial. "All right, Jack," she said, voice echoing lightly. "Marvin's making his move. We need a plan that's more than just spooky noises and rattling chains. It's time for some real ghostly mischief." Jack chuckled dryly, despite the knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach. "Right, mischief with a purpose. Like a ghostly heist movie, but with more ectoplasm and fewer explosions." The group gathered around the battered wooden table littered with maps of the inn and its grounds, old ledgers, and a few ghostly trinkets Eleanor had retrieved from the ether. Tommy leaned in, his rugged face lit by the flickering candlelight. "I've rigged up a few surprise traps," he said, tapping his toolbox. "Nothing lethal, just enough to make Marvin's goons think twice before stepping foot in here." Sally adjusted her glasses, her voice measured but tinged with intrigue. "Historical records suggest these grounds have always been, well, lively. Perhaps the ghost's antics can be more than mere scares. They could be a strategic advantage." Mabel, the retired tourist whose enthusiasm was a beacon of warmth amid the tension, clapped her hands. "Oh, I do love a good community effort. Let's show Marvin the true spirit of Marley Inn." With the plan forming, the inn became a fortress of laughter and chaos. In the following days, Eleanor and the other ghosts, previously content with minor pranks, stepped up their game. Flying teacups shattered windows at just the right moment to create distractions, portraits swung ominously yet comically, and occasional gusts of chilly wind swept through corridors, sending papers flying in patterns that seemed almost choreographed. Jack darted through the rooms, issuing orders with a dry wit that kept spirits high even when his own nerves threatened to unravel. "Eleanor, try not to break the antique clock this time," he quipped as a sudden crash echoed from the hallway. "No promises," Eleanor replied with a wink. One evening, as Marvin's hired thugs approached the inn under the cover of dusk, the plan swung into full effect. Mabel rang the old brass bell with exaggerated zeal, a signal to the ghosts. In an instant, the inn erupted into a symphony of supernatural pranks. Ectoplasmic slime appeared on the floor, forcing the intruders into slapstick slips. Ghostly whispers confused and disoriented them, and the infamous flying teacups launched a surprise attack that sent several tumbling into bushes. Outside, the local townsfolk had gathered, drawn by the commotion and Jack's infectious optimism. They watched, half in disbelief and half in amusement, as the ghosts and innkeeper stood united against the corporate threat looming over their beloved Marley Inn. In the aftermath, as Marvin's men limped away, bedraggled and humiliated, Jack shared a triumphant glance with Eleanor. Their laughter mingled with the creaking timbers of the inn, a sound that now felt less like decay and more like a living heartbeat. The alliance forged in the heat of chaotic defense was more than a tactical victory. It was a testament to the power of unexpected friendships and resilience. Jack knew the battle was far from over, but with his spectral allies at his side, he was ready to face whatever came next with laughter, wit, and a touch of ghostly magic. And as the candles flickered low, casting playful shadows on the peeling wallpaper, Jack whispered to the ghosts, "Whatever happens, we're in this together. Now, who's up for a little more mischief?" Eleanor's joyful laughter echoed through the halls, a sound that promised that the Marley Inn's story was far from finished. Marvin Delaney's sleek office was a stark contrast to the weathered charm of the Marley Inn, but today it felt more like a cage than a throne. He paced back and forth, the polished floor reflecting his sharply polished shoes, while his mind replayed the mounting setbacks he faced. The confident mask he wore in public was beginning to crack, revealing the man beneath the man haunted not by ghosts, but by memories of a family legacy marred by failure. The faint echo of ghostly laughter floated through the air, an almost imperceptible reminder of the Marley Inn's spectral defenders. Marvin clenched his fists, frustration bubbling beneath his calm exterior. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper. But deep down, doubt gnawed at him like a persistent shadow. Meanwhile, back at the inn, Jack Marley was riding the wave of small victories with newfound confidence. Encouraged by the growing support from the community and emboldened by the ghost's antics, he knew the tide was turning. Eleanor, the ever-mischievous poltergeist, was at the heart of the next phase of their plan. During a scheduled meeting with Marvin's legal team, Jack and Elena orchestrated a spectacle that was both hilarious and unsettling. As the lawyers gathered in the conference room, Eleanor unleashed a perfectly timed prank. The room suddenly chilled, lights flickered erratically, and a chorus of ethereal giggles filled the air. Documents fluttered off the table, papers swirling like autumn leaves caught in a sudden gust. The lawyers exchanged startled glances, the stern expressions faltering amid the chaos. "What in the world?" one of them exclaimed, reaching for a light switch that stubbornly refused to work. Jack, feigning innocence, leaned back in his chair with a dry smile. "Just a bit of the inn's unique charm," he quipped. The disruption rattled the legal team's composure, buying Jack precious time and sowing seeds of doubt about the strength of Marvin's campaign. Word of the incident spread quickly, further endearing the inn to the town's residents, who began to see Marvin's efforts as heavy-handed and out of touch. Tummy and Sally, meanwhile, delved into the town archives, determined to find any leverage that could aid their cause. Amid dusty ledgers and brittle newspapers, they uncovered a forgotten chapter of Marvin's past, a hidden document revealing the collapse of his family's luxury hotel decades earlier. The revelation painted Marvin not just as a ruthless businessman, but as a man driven by the desperate need to redeem a tarnished family name. "No wonder he's so relentless," Sally remarked, adjusting her glasses as she laid the papers out on the table. "It's more than just business for him." This newfound understanding fueled Jack's resolve and brought a nuanced perspective to their fight. The community's empathy began to shift, and whispers of support for the Marley Inn grew louder. As night fell, Marvin sat alone in his penthouse, the city lights twinkling below like a constellation of distant hopes. The weight of his unraveling plans pressed heavily on his shoulders. He stared into the darkened room, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the city beyond his windows. For the first time in years, the predatory smile faded, replaced by a look of raw vulnerability. The failures of the past and the chaos wrought by Jack and his ghostly allies converged in a moment of introspection. How had it come to this? Could he turn the tide, or was he destined to become a cautionary tale himself? Back at the Marley Inn, the atmosphere was electric with cautious optimism. Jack gathered his friends, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the tension that gripped Marvin's world. The ghosts floated nearby, their translucent forms shimmering with pride and anticipation. "We were not out of the woods yet," Jack reminded them, "but we've cracked his armor. Now, we keep pushing. Together." Eleanor twirled through the air, a mischievous grin lighting her ghostly face. "Let's make sure he never forgets who owns this place," she whispered, her voice a playful echo. And so, with a blend of human tenacity and spectral mischief, the battle for the Marley Inn's future surged forward, promising laughter, chaos, and perhaps redemption for all involved. Yet as Marvin plotted his next move in the shadows, one question lingered in the air. How far was he willing to go to reclaim his pride? And what cost would that exact on everyone caught in the crossfire? The stage was set for a reckoning, and the Marley Inn's fate hung in a delicate balance poised between collapse and triumph, sorrow and joy, the living and the dead. The sun had barely climbed above the horizon when Jack Marley found himself crouched among a tangle of wild flowers in the overgrown garden behind the Marley Inn, a battered rake in hand and a grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. The air was fresh and tinged with the scent of damp earth and blooming hawthorn, a fragrant promise that today might just be different. He glanced up at the sky, where soft clouds drifted lazily, and then at the ancient stone walls of the inn, which, despite their cracks and peeling paint, stood proud like a stubborn old friend. "You really think this will work?" came a voice from behind, light and teasing. Jack turned to see Eleanor, the poltergeist, drifting nearby, her translucent form shimmering like a candle flame in a breeze. She wore her usual vintage dress, slightly faded but still elegant in a ghostly sort of way. "I think we're overdue for a little celebration," Jack replied, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "If we can get the community to see this place the way we do, not just haunted, but alive, maybe we'll all find more friends than skeptics." Eleanor floated closer, her eyes sparkling mischief. "Then let's make sure it's a party they'll never forget." Over the next few hours, the Marley Inn buzzed with preparation. Tommy, Jack's steadfast best friend, wielded a hammer and a paintbrush with practiced ease, fixing loose shutters and hanging strings of fairy lights that twinkled like captured stars. Sally, the local historian, sorted through stacks of yellowed pamphlets and photographs, her glasses perched precariously on the end of her nose as she arranged a display showcasing the inn's colorful past, complete with spectral anecdotes carefully annotated. Mabel arrived mid-morning, her bright scarves fluttering as she swept in like a whirlwind of enthusiasm. "This is exactly what the town needs," she declared, her twinkling eyes scanning the scene. "A bit of chaos, a bit of charm, and a whole lot of laughter." As the afternoon sun dipped toward the west, guests began to trickle in. Townsfolk who had once whispered doubts and rolled their eyes now stood curious and open, drawn by the buzz and the promise of something extraordinary. Children darted between groups, squealing as invisible currents sent leaves swirling, and Eleanor's playful poltergeist pranks a sudden chill here. A mysteriously rattling window there kept everyone on their toes. Inside the parlor, Mabel held court, her voice animated as she recounted tales of ghostly encounters, each story punctuated by soft bursts of laughter, and the occasional eerie moan courtesy of Eleanor, who delighted in theatrical timing. The room was alive with a warm glow from the fireplace and the flicker of candlelight, shadows dancing in tandem with the guests' smiles. Tommy and Sally worked side by side repairing a wobbly staircase, sharing jokes and rolling their eyes at the occasional levitating tools and flying paintbrushes that Eleanor mischievously sent their way. It was a delicate ballet of order and chaos, and their teamwork was a testament to the newfound spirit of camaraderie that infused the inn. As dusk settled, Jack found himself on the porch, leaning against the weathered railing and surveying the scene. Underneath strings of twinkling lights, the crowd mingled like a patchwork quilt of laughter and chatter, the boundaries between the living and the spectral delightfully blurred. Eleanor's faint glow wove through the guests like a silvery thread, her laughter mingling with the music drifting on the evening breeze. Jack felt a swell of something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not the desperate kind that clawed at his chest in sleepless nights, but the buoyant, irrepressible kind that filled the air like the scent of wild flowers and promised that, even amid chaos, there was belonging. "Looks like we did it," Elena whispered, drifting to his side. "Looks like we did," Jack agreed, raising an imaginary glass to the night. "And this is just the beginning." But as the laughter carried into the twilight, a shadow lurked beyond the garden gate. Marvin Delaney, his predatory smile thin and calculating. The battle for the Marley Inn was far from over, but tonight the community had claimed their ground, turning chaos into camaraderie and haunting into hope. And Jack Marley was ready to fight for every wild, wonderful moment of it. The night hummed with possibility, and amid the flickering lights and spectral giggles, the Marley Inn breathed new life, a beacon for the strange, the joyful, and the resilient. What surprises would tomorrow bring? Jack wasn't about to find out without a fight, but for now, laughter reigned supreme. Jack Marley sat heavily on the worn armchair in the inn's common room, the creaking floorboards beneath him echoing the unrest in his mind. The Marley Inn was quiet, save for the occasional soft moan of wind through the cracked window panes and the rhythmic crackle of the fireplace. Shadows danced on the peeling wallpaper, and the faint scent of aged wood mingled with the ever-present aroma of brewing tea lingering in the air. Alone with his thoughts, Jack battled the familiar swirl of doubt and anxiety that had become a near-constant companion since the ghost tour idea took flight. He rubbed his tired eyes and leaned back, gazing at the ceiling where the faint shimmer of Eleanor's translucent form flickered softly. "You sure you're not just a figment of my overworked brain?" he muttered, a wry smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Eleanor's ghostly laughter chimed like a delicate bell, playful and full of mischief. "I'm very much real, and I can assure you I'm way more interesting than any hallucination," she teased, swirling effortlessly through the air, her vintage dress trailing like a misty veil. "Besides, someone's got to keep you on your toes, Jack." Jack chuckled, the sound a little hollow but genuine. "I suppose you're right, though sometimes I wonder if I'm the one keeping you on your toes." Eleanor winked, her eyes sparkling with an otherworldly light. "Maybe, but that's the fun of it." The inn had always been a place of charm and chaos, but lately, the chaos was taking on a new shape, one that Jack was only just beginning to understand. The ghosts weren't just pesky spirits, they were partners in a venture that defied convention and reason. Yet, embracing that truth was easier said than done. Just then, the soft tap-tap of footsteps approached, and Jack looked up to see Mabel stepping into the room, her bright scarf fluttering slightly despite the lack of breeze. Her twinkling eyes held a warmth that cut through the gloom. "Mind if I join you?" she asked, settling into the chair opposite him without waiting for an answer. Jack smiled, grateful for the company. "Never." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the crackling fire knitting a cocoon of comfort around them. "You know, Jack," Mabel began, her voice gentle but firm. "This inn, with all its quirks and unusual guests, it's a beacon for people like me. People looking for a little magic in their lives." Jack looked at her, the lines of worry softening around his eyes. "Magic, huh? That's a generous word for a bunch of mischievous spirits and a crumbling building." Mabel chuckled. "Maybe. But it's the kind of magic that makes you smile, even when things are tough. It's the laughter, the unexpected friendships, the stories that make life worth living." Jack nodded slowly, feeling the truth of her words seep into him like warm sunlight after a long winter. Meanwhile, Eleanor drifted in, her form shimmering with renewed energy. "If you'll allow me," she said with a mischievous grin, "I thought I'd show you a little something." Before Jack could respond, a swirl of light and a flurry of small objects, teacups, silverware, and a feather duster whirled around the room in a graceful dance. The air hummed with a joyous energy, and for a moment, Jack saw the inn not as a burden, but as a lively, breathing entity full of potential. "See, we're here to help," Eleanor said, settling beside him with a satisfied sigh. Tommy's hearty laugh echoed from the hallway as he entered, toolbox in hand. "Looks like the ghosts are in a good mood today," he said, nodding toward the animated scene. Sally followed closely behind, clutching a thick book. "I've dug up some fascinating stories about the inn's past," she announced. "These tales could add a whole new layer to our tours." Jack's eyes brightened. "Now that's the kind of chaos I can get behind." The group gathered around the old wooden table, papers and books spread out, laughter mingling with plans and ideas. Ghostly whispers and gentle breezes wove through the room, a spectral symphony accompanying their collaboration. In that moment, Jack felt the weight of his fears lift, replaced by a buoyant hope. The Marley Inn was more than a fading relic. It was a living story, a bridge between worlds, and he was its storyteller. As the night deepened, Jack looked out the window at the star-studded sky. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, there was only the promise of new beginnings and the unshackable joy of facing the future not alone, but with friends, both living and not. And somewhere beyond the veil, a faint chorus of laughter echoed, a reminder that even in the most unexpected places, hope and happiness could be found. But as Jack settled in for the night, a sudden chill swept through the room, and a mysterious knocking sounded from the attic, hinting that the inn's secrets were far from fully revealed. The adventure continued.